Hi, welcome back. So this is a multi-part responsive design series. For this section, we will actually discuss an approach to creating responsive design assets. So this directly references being able to generate the visual components, but also the information architecture of how this content should be prioritized and also how they live on the screen. So when designing for responsive design work, I would say that the first thing that you should do is to actually specify this hierarchy before you begin to create your high fidelity design work. And this should be uncovered through user research and design research. So getting to know not only your market space, but also the customer base in which you're looking to target. But as you uncover that information, you can begin putting together this specification sheet that specifies this hierarchy or defines the level of importance for all the content that eventually needs to live in your product. Being able to do user research or design research also allows you to use the language of your customers or your users in the product design. So I think there is no worse thing than designing products where they're too technical or they use internal jargon to explain something for an external user base. So in conducting your design research and your customer interviews, you should be able to pull out specific keywords or to better understand how they classify information and use that as a springboard to actually create this hierarchy of information. You can do this through the use of note cards or flowcharts. So if you keep it lower fidelity, so not making it, high pixel, brilliant, beautiful, just using boxes and lines and words, this will actually help you move a lot more quickly so that you can spend more time in the design that is pixel perfect and beautiful. So here's an example of this note card approach that I took when I was working on a robotics product. And here I've used Sharpies and index cards. You can certainly see that on screen. And although you might not be able to zoom in and take a look at the content on the screen or on these cards, here I've started identifying different usage patterns and the type of language that I would need to use in this digital product. So here on the left side, I have a series of 1, 2, 3. So these, I think this was for onboarding and providing directions on how to connect a robot with a phone. So here I have the step-by-step of the types of information that I would need to show and how important it was, and then the different content areas. And here you can start seeing these grouping patterns, not only left to right, but also top to bottom as well. Here I get a little bit more detailed. This reads more left to right, but here top to bottom on the left side, I actually specify the different features that I'm designing for, and then I use note cards that go left to right to explain the flow or the process in which a user would be able to achieve those goals that they've set out for those individual features. I discussed priority guides a little bit earlier, but I wanted to take some time to explain this concept and this methodology so that you can employ it, again, long before you actually start creating these high quality visuals for your product design. So one way to kind of wrap your head around information architecture and hierarchy is by creating a priority guide. So priority guide is very low fidelity. Again, it's words and boxes, maybe some arrows if you get really fancy. But on the right side here, you'll see an example of that. So we have this concept of a web page or a interface that someone would access for information on your product. And we've grouped content based on its level of importance to the user. So here we have the main content that is most important because it shows up first. And then the further down you scroll, you'll get less important content. And I would say that that mirrors pretty much the basic way that people consume content on the web. Anything that's, at least in the in Western languages where you read left to right, top to bottom, our usage patterns and the way that we view content also mirrors that. So we tend to look first at the top left and we scan across and then we start moving down. And you'll notice if you use some analytics software like Google Analytics that the attention span starts dropping off or people start leaving. a page, the further down they get in that content area on the page. So this methodology was coined in 2012 by a great designer, Drew Clemens. And I linked here to the original article that explains the thinking behind the priority guide and provides a little bit more detail. But your key takeaway is that it's low fidelity and that it takes an audit of all of the content that needs to live on the screen and prioritizes it, not only visually, but also from a content management perspective. So in this case, it's organized from top to bottom, left to right. In other languages, depending on which languages you're publishing for, it may be right to left. So make sure you keep that in mind while you work on your designs. Here on the right side, you'll actually see a more fleshed out version of the priority guide. So in each of the contained areas, this designer has created a level of detail that would provide a visual way for a design team and a development team to understand these different buckets of information. So each one of those boxes that you see on the screen represent a content area, and we've got some text or some copy that explains what goes in there, or even has a model of what how it's laid out or the order in which it would be laid out. And then you'll see we got these little dotted lines that point to other copy or other text, and that provides an explanation or an annotation of the information that goes there, but then may also explain things like interaction patterns or the UI components that are used. So this hierarchy shows this, provides a visual concept of what's most important to what's least important. And this is based on the relevance to your user base or to your business. So again, that's uncovered through some research, not only in your competitive marketplace, but then also with the people who will be using your app. When it comes to businesses or business software, you may also need to check in with what we call internal customers. So the people that are internal to your company or internal to the success of it, and make sure you get their feedback as well in terms of what's important and things that they expect first. I wouldn't expect that you would put this priority guide in front of your customers or your users and ask them, is this the most important thing in terms of usage to this app? This is more of a guide for you as a designer when you're creating responsive design assets. So for instance, if you have content on the top that you've deemed the most important and it's bubbled all the way at the top for the priority guide, then I would expect in the manifestation of your designs that it lives close to the top of your mobile, tablet, and desktop designs. I wouldn't expect the most important content to be buried 3 pages in or to be buried further down on the screen. In terms of creating your priority guide, you can definitely use pen and paper and index cards like I showed you earlier. You can also use design software to create some assets where you can share it with other design teams or engineering teams, and you can get feedback or collaborate on those documents. In our class, we have a license for Lucidchart. That's a shared design program that you can use to make flowcharts and wireframes and also share it with a design team. You can also create an Illustrator file or a sketch file, but that would live locally in your computer and you'd have to send off the file to other people to edit. So your overall takeaway with hierarchy and information architecture and priority guides is to focus on the content first, make sure that content provides a great value to your user base or your customer base, and then take that hierarchy and apply it to the design work that you will be conducting. For our next section, we will discuss how to implement responsive design.